There we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural episode of A More Than Human Conversation. And who could I have other than the great Dr. Fantasy himself, Philip Chase?
Well, Joseph, thank you so much for that very nice introduction. And it is my pleasure and honor to be here for the first episode of a more than human. Well, what's the rest of it? Conversation.
A More Than Human Conversation.
Nice. Yeah, of course. And I love the allusion to your book series, which is, I think you've got your 2 books out now, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
2 books and third with the editor right now. So
More Than a Vampire, which I've read and reviewed and enjoyed. And then you have More Than a Gunslinger now, right?
yeah, that's the current one. And then the sequel to the first one. So hopefully might be a Christmas release. I wanted to have it be another Halloween, but just timing and everything. I had told the editor, take your time and make sure we make this as polished, so slowly, working this self-publishing thing out. So
I'm sure there's so much to it. There's of course, just writing a book, there's a lot to that, right? As you know very well. And then nowadays, with self-publishing being what it is, you have to wear several different hats in the process of getting this out into the world, right?
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, you're starting your journey with it as well. But I've talked to traditionally published people, and they're like, yeah, it's not like it was 20 years ago. You have to market yourself.
That's right. Yeah. They expect, I think they being the traditional publishing industry, the folks who work there in the publishing houses, the editors, etc., they pretty much expect an author to be active on social media and to do not all, I hope, but a amount of their own marketing and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I still haven't quite, I have an agent and all of that, and who has submitted my books to editors, but I don't have an editor or a publishing house at this point. So I'm kind of in limbo at the moment, waiting for something to happen. And unfortunately, we're in a time right now when things are very slow in the publishing industry, very slow.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that like everything has kind of started to, slow down drastically.
Yeah. And so, a lot of very established authors too I know I've heard about where they expected their books to be out a year or 2 ago, and it's just been stuck,
Yeah.
And so, I'm not shocked that at this point that it's been 3 months or so since my agent submitted my books, and it's no surprise to anyone that there's no news at this point, but they'll be out, I hope, at some point soon. My goal is to have them out next year, one way or another, and I will definitely pick your brain if I decide to do the self-publishing route, which I would happily go either way. I see the advantages and disadvantages of both paths at this point, traditional self-publishing, and I would be happy to go either way. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I've been watching your channel for 2 years now. I think, and I know you you talked about being a writer, kind of early on, but you kind of were, I don't want to say standoffish about it, but you didn't want to really talk about it too much. And then as things progressed with it, you kind of started talking about it more. And over the last couple months, I've been thinking to myself, I'm just like, well, you have all these people like Will White and even Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah.
Who are it's almost like once you get a platform, you can do it yourself a lot easier than, and I think either way you go, 3 months as from what I know in the traditional trying to get published is not very long. A lot of times these processes take 6 months, year, even more.
Oh yeah.
But you have enough of a platform and enough people really love your content and love your insights that if you do go self-publishing, you're going to be a success, I think.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. I just, one of the things I wanted to do with my life was to create a beautiful story, to create some beauty and share it with the world. And so it is important to me to get that story out there one way or another. And I'm happy to go, like I said, either route. So I appreciate that support a ton. It means the world to me. But yeah, I think, when I started the channel, I had one motivation was I was trying to save my fantasy novels course that I
Yeah,
teach.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was an attempt to generate more, enthusiasm or buzz or whatever. But I was fighting against curricular decisions that made increasingly not just my course, but all literature courses more and more irrelevant to a lot of people's curriculum. In other words, a student might want to take my class, but they had nowhere to put it for their major. So, that was an unfortunate. I don't think we were targeted per se, but it was an unfortunate consequence of some administrative decisions. So I was like, how am I going to get people to take this course? I love teaching this course. I love fantasy. I love exploring it. So I thought, let's try creating a YouTube channel about fantasy. And I had no idea that there were all these channels already out there, some of them very large and very well established. So I just sort of blundered into YouTube without really doing my homework. And I probably made some stupid mistakes early on, but people are gracious and nice on this platform. So I found a community here, and it's been wonderful. So that was I wanted to have a place to talk about fantasy. And so it was that, but I was being fairly, hey, Isaiah, being fairly ignorant about this community. I didn't know that there were going to be so many wonderful people and such rich interactions and the opportunity to make friends. It's been really fantastic. So, oh, no worries, Isaiah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. We'll catch you on the replay. So, yeah. So anyway, yeah, that was, it turned out to be really one of the best moves I ever made, I think, starting a YouTube channel about fantasy, because it didn't exactly save my course, but because although I'm going to keep trying to keep that course alive, I've been having people take it as independent study.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
I was going to ask you, like, how is that actually going? Because I know you've been fighting a good fight for almost 2 years now, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of interest. I have students constantly telling me, I'd love to take this class, but I don't have anywhere to put it. So it's unfortunate, but I think that there might be some more changes coming from the state that might allow it to actually find a home again. So I'm hoping to revive the course, actually. So we'll see what happens with that. But in the meantime, I'm having a blast on this platform, making videos, talking to very fine people like yourself, and just having all these opportunities to learn from people and appreciate the stories that we all love even more.
Well, I think you and AP had this discussion a while back about how much of an impact you guys are actually making. He was like, well, look at your watch time hours, versus the school. But I know being in the school setting is something different, is more, you're face to face, and, and of course you're probably, having people take tests and stuff. So it's even more interactive than here. But I know Sanderson does this. I mean, I don't know, it's probably something to do with your school, but have you ever thought about trying to do, like, film your classes or lectures or something, and then put them on here?
Yeah, that's something I could do if people would be interested in that. I mean, my students are always really full of great insights. It's just like here. And if people take that fantasy novels class, it's because they want to take it.
Yeah.
It's a great atmosphere. Great conversations happen in there. So yeah, that's something I guess I could consider. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big nerd guy like that. So like when I was in school, I was always um, like I'd rather sit and listen to a teacher actually tell me things and us interact and stuff like that, rather than just come and sit the book down and be like, all right, open your books to chapter 4, read through chapter 4, and then my brain is like, I need somebody talking to me. I need interaction. I need to,
Yeah.
you
Well, my courses are all seminar style, which in other words,
yeah,
conversations.
that's
I don't
wow.
even believe in exams and tests. I think they're silly, honestly, unless you're in some discipline where people have to prove that they do
Yeah.
have certain knowledge that is necessary for that field or something like that. Okay, I mean, maybe. But for literature, I think it's silly to do exams and test people on obscure information from a
Yeah.
particular story. To me, dialogue about the story is where the magic happens. It's much more interesting than having some poor student spew out just silly information about the story. But I do give them essays, so they do have to write essays, and that's actually the real difference between what we do here and what I force my students to do, which is they do have to write formal essays, and using MLA format and following certain guidelines and standards, et cetera, and often incorporating critical sources that have to be up to certain standards as well. So there's all of that, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm always interested in like how people's reading journeys started. So how did it start with you? Like where did your love of reading come from? Who kind of instilled that in you?
Wow. Well, that probably would be both my parents actually are readers. And it was my father, though, who was a fantasy reader. My mother read mostly romance. And I never got into that.
Yeah.
Used to tease her sometimes about reading romance books and stuff. But yeah, it was my father who read a lot of fantasy. And so that's where I'm sure I got it from. It was, as I've said to many times, it was Lloyd Alexander was the first fantasy series I could remember reading and feeling very, very invested in. But it was really Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. Of course, I'd read The Hobbit before that, but it was Lord of the Rings that I read when I was around 12 or 13, which really just probably that event, reading Lord of the Rings at that age, that probably determined the course of my life, I would say. I mean, it's that big of a deal. That had that much of an impact on me as a kid.
That I always love to hear people talk about like what was the book like and I mean I had read some other ones, but in my mind I can't really remember too many before like Eaters of the Dead, because I was more of a movie person. But I remember reading Eaters of the Dead in like 8th or 9th grade and just being enthralled with it. Is Lord of the Rings, is that why you got into like medieval and middle age things in the Norse? Is that where it came from for you?
I think so. I mean, I don't know if I consciously said to myself, I need to be exactly like J.R.R. Tolkien and be a medievalist and study Old English and Old Norse and all that. Probably on some level, I know that I wanted to be a writer when I was that age because of Tolkien. And I can remember very distinctly when in 8th grade, we were all asked to tell our school what we want to be when we grow up. And so they would farm us out to, if I said I want to be a police officer, I'd go to the police station for a day. Or if I wanted to be a doctor, they'd bring me to the hospital and I would meet a doctor. And I said, I want to be a writer. So that early, I know for sure I wanted to do, and it was Tolkien that made me want to do that. I really wanted to do for people what Tolkien did for me, and to create that beauty that he created for me in my life, and a sense of belonging in the world. So I decided, I want to be a writer. I want to do what Tolkien did. And I probably went about this not the smartest way, which was I thought, okay, this is what Tolkien did. He was a medievalist and he knew Old English and he knew all these languages. So I got to go study all these languages and be a medievalist so that I can write fantasy.
You're very, very technical. You're like,
Yeah. I mean, I would not advise that path to anyone who actually wants to write modern fantasy. I think there probably are more direct routes where you would want to study. Actually, not just modern fantasy writers, which you need to do, I think, if you're interested in writing fantasy, but in addition, just read broadly and read lots of nonfiction and other things to read outside the genre as well. But yeah, I probably should have read more modern fantasy at a younger age, but I think I'm catching up pretty well. So,
well, I mean, I actually think I mean, if your goal really is like you want to be a full-time writer at some point, maybe not, go that hardcore of a route, but I think it's a good route though, because it'll give you the base of where all these stories that people have written came from. Because I mean, as you know, Tolkien and all these people, they're drawing from the early stories of fairies and the Grimm fairy tales and all that.
Yep.
So you really know the base of all of these things, and then of course, you read a lot of modern books. So
yeah, I would say that I'm happy the way it's turned out. No complaints, and that my grounding in medieval literature and Old English and Old Norse, and also in some of the other things I've done as well, and some of the travels I've had, and living in South Asia and learning Welsh as well at a certain point. These are all things that have worked their way into my writing. And I'm glad for that, because I do think that those influences have helped me to construct a more interesting world for my story. So I have no regrets about going the scenic route.
yeah.
And I hope it'll result in something good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask you about that, because you have done quite a bit of traveling.
Fair amount. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and where were you at? And you were in South Asia. Was it Nepal?
That's correct. Yeah, I lived in Nepal, and I actually traveled. Sorry?
How did you end up there? I've always.
Yeah. So I, in addition to living in Nepal, the first time was for a year, and I also traveled all over India during that time. I spent about a month traveling all over India. So basically, I was doing my master's degree in English literature. After I finished my bachelor's, I went into a master's program, and for really not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, actually, I finished my bachelor's degree and it was in liberal arts, meaning I didn't know what I was doing, and thought, well, I like studying. Let's do some more. So I went and enrolled in a master's program. And I made some really wonderful friends while I was doing my master's degree. And one of them happened to be a person from Nepal who was also doing a master's degree at the same time. And we became very close friends. And he thought, well, wouldn't you like to come to my country? Because we were in the United States. And he said, and I said, yeah. I mean, I had a sense of adventure when I was that age. And so I was absolutely thrilled by the idea. And we looked into it. And long story short, I got a fellowship that allowed me to go to Nepal and teach in a university there for a year.
Oh,
so I was teaching. Yeah, I was teaching at Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu, in Nepal, for a year as kind of a visiting scholar, I guess you could say. Yeah, so I taught in their English department, which was an incredible experience. This was in the mid 90s, so 95 to 96. And yeah, it was a transformative experience for me. I would say that it was one of the most important experiences of my life. Maybe the most important was living in Nepal for that year. It had a huge impact on me. And of course, I still go back all the time. It's a place that I love dearly. And I have family there now because I'm married into a Nepali family. And so, yeah, and I speak Okay, Nepali, not great, but enough to get to where I need to go. But yeah, it's a place that just had a tremendous, and I would say overwhelmingly positive impact on me and who I am, and it challenged me in some ways that I think are really important. Which I would wish, if the world could be perfect, that everybody could have the experience of living in another culture, a culture they didn't grow up in, for a year, because I think it is incredibly informative and helpful, and to understand yourself. Even, you gain a perspective by living in a different place, learning a different language, and you learn a lot about yourself that way. You learn a lot about yourself. So yeah.
That's excellent. Like growing up, I mean, we didn't really have the opportunities to travel very much, but I was always interested in other cultures,
Yeah.
From Native Americans to, people over in India and across the world. I'm a history buff, so
Yeah.
my head was always stuck in the History Channel before they went all crazy and started doing all kinds of other stuff. But
Yeah.
I just, other cultures just fascinate me. How did you learn Welsh? Did you travel there,
I
or
did. Yeah. So I think you hit on something there, Joseph, because a lot of us who are readers, we liked it. We like reading for similar reasons to why we like traveling. I think the two things really are close in some ways. Experiencing other places, whether they're fictional or real, is something that we readers and travelers really enjoy. And so I had that bug certainly when I was younger, of wanting to see the world, but I also was very interested in things Celtic when I was younger, and I still am. So I actually, on my own, when I was 18, started to learn Welsh. I had books that I got, and I don't remember exactly how I found out what textbooks were good, but I did some research, and this was before the internet, so it was just me having to figure out the hard way what would be some good textbooks for learning Welsh. And I got cassettes. I had cassettes that went with
excellent?
the
Yeah,
textbook.
yeah.
So that
I'm old enough to still remember those a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, cassettes. So I had the sounds, I had the books, and for about a year on my own, I learned Welsh, just because. I loved languages. I got a passion for languages in high school by taking Latin and Spanish, and I became interested in languages because of that. So basically, yeah, Welsh just seemed like something cool. I love King Arthur and all that sort of stuff.
I was just about to say, is that wanting to know Welsh because of our
I mean, in my case, yeah. I mean, there's a lot more to Wales than King Arthur, but yeah. I mean, in my case, being someone who's attracted to the Middle Ages, and I knew that Tolkien based one of his Elvish languages, Sindarin, on Welsh. So it was cool for that too. I thought, okay, this is gonna be fun. So I just learned Welsh for a year, and I guess I do have some Welsh ancestry back there somewhere or other. But anyway, yeah. And after a year, I had been working during the summers and when I could, and saving my pennies in order to go to Wales. I really wanted to go to the United Kingdom as a whole, and there's still places I want to see there. But I love traveling to the UK. And I essentially just went for a summer to England and Wales, mostly Wales, in order to. I had enrolled in an immersion course, and yeah, so I was in a small town, which in English is called Lampeter. It's in Western Wales. In Welsh, it's Llanbedr Pont Steffan, that's the Welsh name for that town. And there is a branch of the University of Wales there. So I enrolled in this immersion course, and I was actually placed based on, I had come there for studying after a year. I was placed in the advanced class.
Oh, I was gonna ask you how were you from self-learning to being dropped in?
I was pretty good. I was actually really good at reading, and I think looking back, I probably wasn't as good at listening as I could have been. But because of the immersion course, I ended up really being fluent that summer in Welsh. I was very
That's
close to being fluent in Welsh. I was talking to my fellow students, but also, there were people out in the town because it's Western Wales where a lot of people still speak Welsh. I could interact with the locals and speak to them in Welsh, and so it was very. I think it's the most fluent I've ever been in a language other than English was that summer because
wow.
even though I lived in Nepal longer, um, a lot of people in Nepal, particularly the ones I interacted with at university, are English speakers. So I had fewer opportunities actually to speak Nepali in a way. But and I don't read Nepali either. I only speak it. It's the only language I know that I only speak, don't read. But anyway, yeah, it was. That was a wonderful immersive experience, and I love the UK in general. I love Wales, and there's so many places I still want to see though over there. But yeah,
Yeah, me and my family, we've kind of made this decision that we're gonna over the last couple of years that we're gonna start traveling. You know,
nice.
we've been to Toronto, been Colorado, seen the
Yeah.
Native American ruins out there because we're big into Native American stuff.
Mm,
Of course, here in Ohio, we have like Serpent Mound and Mound City and all that stuff, so we do that a lot.
nice. Yeah,
But
I just went to Toronto myself over the summer, and
how'd you like it?
I loved it. I
Yeah.
actually had a great time, and one of my viewers, I don't know if you know him, but Paul Van Doleward told me about because he's from Canada, from near Toronto, I guess, but he told me about this bookstore in Toronto that is only fantasy and science fiction. Yeah,
That's nice.
yeah, it
That would be
was
cool.
so cool. It was like you walk in there, and for us fantasy nerds, it's just like, whoa, did I just die and go to heaven? So
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
Well, I know you grew up with comic books, right? You were a comic book
yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah.
So while you were in Toronto, did you? Well, I guess I should ask. Did have you watched any of the X-Men movies over the last 20 years?
Yes, yeah, I have watched. I haven't watched some more recent ones, but I did watch the older X-Men
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, and
So
I
yeah, they
loved
I
it.
guess yeah, we went to the mansion up there that all of them were shot at.
Oh,
That's
no
where
kidding!
yeah, me and my
Wow.
wife were. That was like when we seen that on the brochure. We're like, "Yep, we gotta go there." So we have pictures of like, "Oh, this is where Wolverine was standing," and and all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Neat.
so yeah, because
Yeah.
we're big nerds, so we were just looking for any of that kind of cool stuff up
Oh,
there.
that's fun. Yeah, for sure.
But Toronto's might be my favorite like large city I've ever been to. I mean, it's so weird. It's almost like they built their city around the forest because there's like chunks and stuff, and it just looks like they weren't like, oh, let's knock it all down. It's like let's like work around it, and
Yeah.
and I guess that whole thing about Canadians are really nice kind of is true because we were definitely when we were driving through the city and stuff, we were like, yeah, we're probably driving this all wrong and not, because we're not from here, we're out of towners, but
Yeah.
nobody got mad at us for like taking too long or whatever. Where in
Yeah.
most cities they're like blaring the horn, get out of my way.
Yeah, no, it's a great city, and I've been to quite a few Canadian cities now, and I've always had a positive experience up there. Our neighbors to the north are really, they tend to be friendly folks, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I mean, I've talked with Sarah, on many occasions, and I'm like,
yes.
we're gonna go up, up there to the Norse ruins at some point. So that's gonna happen.
Oh, yeah, to Lonzo Meadow, where they
Yep.
have the Viking settlement. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She lives not very far from there. Yeah,
She's just a couple hours away, I think, or maybe
yeah,
not even that.
in
But
Newfoundland. Yeah.
yeah. So So how did you decide that you were going to be a teacher? Where did that come from?
Well, that was more or less me just falling into without having a clue what I was going to do with myself. I got a master's degree, and then the next step after teaching in Nepal was, well, what do I do now? And I guess I still like studying, so let's do a PhD. So I did a PhD, and about a little less than halfway through the PhD, I thought, I actually like teaching, and because as part of the my graduate program, I did teach. I started teaching composition as a graduate student, and I'm sure I made a ton of mistakes as a young new teacher, but I figured out that I actually like this. This is really cool, and I got a bug. I got the bug for teaching at that point, and probably a little less than halfway through the PhD, I decided, yeah, I want to do this with my life. I want to be in academia. I want to teach. Mostly, for me, it was about teaching. I did enjoy writing my dissertation, and it's about medieval stuff. It's about actually, I focused on a guy named William Morris who wrote fantasies in the 1890s and was a
Yeah.
major inspiration for Tolkien. So people don't read his prose romances, as they called them, his fantasies, a whole lot these days, but he was doing a lot of what Tolkien ended up doing. That's the guy I wrote my dissertation about, but he also did translations of Icelandic sagas, and he
Nice.
translated Beowulf. And so I was primarily looking at his translation stuff. But it also, the language that he used in those translations ended up being the language that he used for his fantasies as well. It's a very special, archaic kind of language that definitely influenced Tolkien. And he had poems in there too. He had poems in his fantasies, and Tolkien has poems in his. It just sort of seemed the thing to do, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody, kind of like you were saying with like how people who are really big into history kind of, want to travel and that kind of all mingles together. I also think if you're big into history, you almost want to, it's almost like you have a teaching bug where you want to teach people about it too. You're like, this is great. You should know it, because I always thought if when I was in high school, I was like, well, I'd love to be a high school history teacher. That would be cool, just to kind of, teach people, about, the crazy things that have happened over the years. And
Yeah.
I love Norse stuff, but I was really big into Roman and Greek. And
Cool. Alan would love to hear that.
that's you and Alan, your conversations have been some of my favorite on all of BookTube. I mean, from your guys' talks there to your rants as teachers. I mean, the one where you guys went, you a little bit, but I know Alan went really crazy in on it. That might have been my favorite conversation ever.
Was that when he was on Dear Dr. Fantasy? Is that
I think you might have been over on his channel for some reason. I'm not
Okay.
sure. But yeah, he was talking about how Florida is doing all these crazy things and him not being able to teach courses the way he wants to teach them, and how they get in the way of teachers and everything.
Yes. Yeah, that's fairly, unfortunately, the people in charge, the bureaucrats, haven't figured out that they probably do more harm than good when they get in the way of the teachers. And there are plenty of countries where they do it right. I loved pointing at Finland, for example, is a country where I think it's fair to say teachers are much more respected. They're certainly paid a lot more. And they tend to be very talented, bright people who are attracted to the profession because it's respected and rewarded. So here, I don't think that the people in charge trust teachers to do what they need to do. So that's part of the issue. I think we have a very test-oriented educational system as well, and I've already said I'm not a fan of tests and exams and even grades. So And we just keep getting more and more deep into that with all these standardized tests. And, it's just, to me, it is actually not conducive to a good education. It is doing actually quite a bit of harm, in my opinion, all these
Yeah.
tests that are.
Yeah, my favorite teacher of all time, her name was Miss Etzel, and
Uh-huh.
she teached. Of course, she was a history teacher, but and this must have been 17, 18 years ago. But she had like a breakdown because one of the students that graduated the same year as I did, he, was not a great test taker, not great in school, but she like broke down in front of the whole class,
Really?
and she's like, grades aren't everything. Yeah, that's not what makes you. And she was kind of right in line with you about all the standardized testing. And,
Yeah.
it's like almost if you don't get a certain grade here, that's what you are as a person, almost, is where the way some people kind of make it out to be.
Right. Yeah. But basically, I think what we have is a factory system, not an educational system. And, or even worse, maybe there's a sort of like a customer model. Nowadays, a lot of people in charge seem to view students not as students, but as customers. When you get to the level where I am in higher education, there's a tendency to corporatize these days academia, and to look at it as somehow like this for-profit corporate entity where the students are customers. And the problem with that mentality is when that becomes the priority, when making money becomes the priority, you've already guaranteed that you're not going to do what's best for learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to do what's best for learning if money is your main priority. And you will cut where you shouldn't. You will reward administrators like their CEOs. And so you have these administrators with big fat and getting bigger and bigger salaries, and teachers and professors who are making less and less because they're not getting raises. And you have tuition getting hiked up on the students, which to me is the worst of all of that. That we're demanding how much education costs in this country is absolutely immoral, in my opinion. That we have this for-profit model when it comes to education and healthcare. I could go in there as well, but let's stick with education. And we want to make money off of this, I think, is a kind of sickness to me. There are certain things that really we shouldn't be trying to make money off of. That people, let's invest in people. Aren't people worth investing in? So that's how I feel about it. And I think the corporate mentality is destroying education in this country.
Yeah. And like, I think it started, I mean, it's always been around, but I remember there was a shift from like when I was ending elementary school, entering middle school, everyone was like, go to college. That's a good thing to go to college and learn and, help you go into wherever you want to go into in the workforce. But then somewhere around like eighth and ninth grade, I remember hearing we were at an assembly, and they literally were like, 89% of you are going to have to go to college to have any kind of career. I mean, they I don't know where that number came from, but then it's like, no wonder just a few years after that, the amount of student loan debt overtook housing debt, for how much people owe. Because it's like, well, if you're telling 9 out of 10 people they have to go to college to be anything in life, well, they're going to panic and they're going to start, oh, okay, I'm 18 years old. I maybe I'd rather work on cars, but I got to go to college, It's like, so they dumped 50. I knew a kid that was $40,000 in debt after his first year. I mean, he did everything you could do at like Cincinnati University or something. I don't want to pick on them or anything, but like, I guess he took out all the loans for everything,
Ouch.
And I'm like, that's just
crippling. It's so crippling to finish your bachelor's degree and be a couple $100,000 in debt. And that's not something you climb out of very easily.
Well, and people talk about like teachers are definitely underpaid. And it's like, well, I remember as I was exiting high school, I was actually kind of close to a few teachers. I've always liked older people than the people my own age. So I
Yeah.
always gravitated to talking to them and stuff. And they were forcing them as high school teachers at that time to either have a master's or be pursuing a master's degree.
Oh.
And so they had to, so all these teachers were going back to school during the summertime and on nights and all this. And so they're building that debt up again, even after they got out. And it's like, if you think about it, if you're $100,000 in debt coming out of, college, and you're going into a job that you want to do it because you love it,
Right.
but it's only what were they making back then? Like a little over $30,000 a year to start off with.
Ouch.
And then you want a car. Well, that's another $25,000 in debt. And then at some point you want a house, right? And you just dump another $150,000, $200,000 on top of you. And I look at lucky or unlucky, depending on your view of the way I kind of grew up. We were, very impoverished and all that. So I looked at that and I was like, I can't do that. But then I feel bad for people who that's what they want to do. They want to teach. They want to help the next generation, and then you're crushing them with so much debt, and then you're not paying them enough to dig out of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, teachers aren't the only profession where they don't make enough to justify what they spend on their education. But yeah, it's a system that's geared for making money, not for making citizens. And so I think it's as long as that's the case, we're going to have the type of situation that we have, which is an educational system that is dysfunctional. But yeah.
I mean, that's why I was glad when I heard that you were kind of going into an administrator side of things, because even in my job, we don't get because we're unionized, right? We don't get the good people who want to go into supervision. It's always the people who don't want to do the work. But I'm glad to see, because I know that you actually care about learning and students, and I mean just the things that you talk about right here. So hopefully more people can take your path and kind of help the system.
Yeah, I would like to think that is possible. Otherwise, I probably would walk away. I believe that people can do good even in the broken system that we have, and that if you're dedicated and passionate about teaching, it can still be a good career. But it's gotten harder. I'll be honest with you. It's been a couple decades of this nonsense building on itself more and more. I think anybody who teaches K through 12 would tell you that there's a lot more just nonsense these days than there ever used to be. And most of it gets in the way of teaching rather than enhances it. And the same is, it's creeping more and more into higher education too. Yeah. Oh, well, what can you do? But the good thing is we have Booktube here, where we're free of all that nonsense, and we do this because we love it. And we have great exchanges here.
Yeah. And that's one thing I was going to ask. So I know you recently put out a video about your 50 years young, and you were out there, smashing some balls out there on the tennis court. So how did you get into tennis?
Tennis. Oh, wow. Okay. So I started playing tennis when I was around 35, which is very late.
Okay.
Most tennis players, yeah. I mean, most tennis players are retired at that age if they're professionals. So
yeah.
So it's a sport that I discovered only later, I guess, and I've been playing it for like 15 years now. And it was just a bunch of friends that we probably looked awful out there, just hitting in all kinds of ways that are definitely not the way you want to hit. But we kind of taught ourselves how to play over time. and by going online, and you can, there are all kinds of videos on YouTube for teaching people how to play tennis. So there was some of that. Plus, you hang around tennis courts enough, and it's just like books. You hang around Booktube, you meet lots of nice people. Same thing with tennis. I eventually met players who were definitely better than I was, but the thing about me was I was able to run a lot. I used to be a marathon runner, and I was pretty fast. So I was able to play bettors who are better than I am, really better shot makers, but I keep getting the ball back.
That's the same exact way as when I didn't start playing until I was a junior, and I was in track and football and all that. And people were like, oh, I was good friends with the coach. He was the English teacher.
Oh, okay.
He's like, well, why don't you come over and play? And I was the same way. I'm sure I was horrible at hitting, but I could always catch it. I could always catch it because I was I'm tall and I ran. So I definitely understand what you mean there, where you're able to kind of keep up with people you maybe shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, definitely. So I used to be a sort of a frustrating person to play against for players better than I was, for sure, because I kept getting the ball back. But as I've gotten older, I figured out, okay, I need to know how to hit the ball and be offense as well as defense, because I'm getting older and I can't run around forever like this. So I have definitely had the opportunity to play with better people than me, and they've taught me how to hit a proper forehand and backhand and serve and everything else, there's a lot to tennis. It's a very technical sport. So if you're actually out there and you're hitting the ball correctly or semi-correctly, in my case, there's a lot to learn. It's a sport where, anyone can go out there with a tennis racket and balls and whack the ball around. But you can tell. I mean, I know enough to be able to tell when somebody's been trained, really, and enough to really respect when I see players like pros or just players who are much better than I am. I know enough to realize, wow, what they're doing is really impressive. I think people who don't know anything at all about tennis might see the pros and be like, yeah, whatever, I could do that. And they have no idea how hard what they're doing actually is.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I'm like, to appreciate tennis, all you have to do is know a little bit. If you just know a little bit, it's amazing to watch, because you're just like, I mean, I even watched, I was watching your video there, and you got some nice top spin, and
a little bit.
You even hit a drop shot once, I think, and that to me was the hardest. Like
drop shots are tricky. Yeah.
I mean, even as a senior, I couldn't hit a drop shot. I mean, it always right into the net or way over.
Well, that happens to me a lot too. But no, I enjoy the athletes that I enjoy watching. The tennis players that I enjoy watching the most are usually the ones who are most versatile. So you don't usually see a lot of, hey, Joanna, good to see you. You don't usually see a ton of players these days who like serve and volley, or who come to the net a lot, or have good hands. It's a lot of just pounding the ball from the baseline, which to me is okay. It's cool. They're very athletic, and that's hard to do. And I'm sure that the ball would whiz right by me, but But I really like seeing the net play. I like those rare, serve and volleyers and that sort of thing. So I like old school tennis, in other words. I think it's just prettier. It's more beautiful to watch.
I used to play a lot of doubles, and
so you had to be able to hit volleys then.
Yeah, that was my strength. I was for as high a level as we played, I was the volley guy. It was like, all right, smash it when it comes in.
And, those long arms, I'm sure, came in handy when you were volleying. Yeah. So, although if I were playing against you, I'd hit the ball right at you. That's what you do to the tall guys, right?
Yeah.
I see you up at the net, I'm hitting the ball straight at you as hard as I can.
So you're one of those. You're one of those guys, Philip. One of those richest tennis players.
Ivan Lendl style.
Oh, right? We're playing for money. Is that what we're doing? We're winning at all costs.
Oh, it's more or less for glory. Forget
It's all about the glory.
yeah.
Uh, so is that what you do to kind of release all of the tension off of life? Is
Oh,
reading and tennis?
definitely. Yeah. Tennis is my therapy. It's a form of meditation. When you're on the court and you're in the zone, it's a transcendent experience, and it's just yeah, and it's good for the body too. It's a really actually. So I did run half marathons and marathons, so I am pretty fairly knowledgeable about the cardiovascular demands of running. Tennis is not quite as demanding as marathon running, but it's close. I mean, it's more sprinting and stopping and sprinting. It's stop and go, stop and go. So it's not like a steady kind of
Yeah.
pace. But you have to be in good shape to play tennis well.
Oh, ridiculous. Yeah. I mean,
Tennis it's like 80 or 90% legs, really.
yeah, I mean, I remember, being in because, I was playing against kids who've, their parents taught them how to play when they were, 5 years old.
They
And
had
so
lessons. They had
so
lessons. Yeah.
so I'm just learning from, a year and a half or whatever through my coach and stuff. And I'm like you said, I'm just keeping up with them because of my athleticism. But
Right.
I ended up in some of the longest, matches in our high school.
Yep.
And it is so hard. Like the only thing that I can compare that was harder, I mean, I played football and baseball and track, and those, I mean, outside of running doing a mile run,
Oh yeah.
swimming is the only thing that I can compare to it as like competitive swimming. I
Yeah.
did that for like a minute and then I was over. But tennis is so hard. I mean, you get a match that goes over an hour and you are hurting. I mean, I don't know how some of these guys professional go for 3 hours. I mean,
they're in incredible shape. Yeah.
I mean, the pain on your hips from serving, coming down on it. But but like you said, like there's nothing quite like being in the zone. Once you get in there, I mean, I've done it a couple times in tennis, and then when I was a pitcher in baseball, that's where it was out a lot. I mean, that's not as good for you as tennis as far as cardiovascular, but
no,
just being locked in, there's just something magical about being in the zone.
That's so true. Yeah, I think any athlete probably can relate to that. Yeah.
It's one thing that's kind of similar to that is if you're, reading a book and sometimes you'll get into it where you're in the book. Like nothing's pulling you out of it. The writing's not pulling you out of it. The externals aren't pulling you out of it. And you're there,
I agree. And it can happen when you're writing too. When you're writing. And for me, I've actually had experiences where I look up at the clock and I realize that 3 or 4 hours have gone by and it feels like 10 minutes because I'm so absorbed in that world, in that story. And it's just one of the most wonderful feelings. Yeah.
So I know you said you've been working on your story for what, 17, 18 years now?
Yeah, about 18 years. Yeah. Yeah. So I should say not constantly.
Yeah, on and off.
Mostly in the summers when I have time to do it when I'm not teaching. Yeah.
So I know you've talked a little bit about it. So what's kind of in your mind, what did you think like this is the type of story I'm going to write? So what type of story is it going to be?
Yeah. Well, I would classify it as epic fantasy. And it's like some of the older style fantasy. It's like Tolkien is the obvious example, but also for me, William Morris, whom not so many people have read, but there's a definite grounding in the Old English and the Old Norse and that sort of thing. Not just in terms of like the cultural presentation, but in terms of the themes. So I tend to be very interested in the themes of, like, let's say, Old English poetry, where there is a sort of an uber theme of life's fleetingness. And you see a lot of what's called ubi sunt poetry in Old English. Ubi sunt being actually a Latin term for where are they? Where have they gone? Where are the people who came before us? That sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that in fantasy, as you know. You can see that in just about, you look at like Tad Williams, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and you have this older civilization that's literally buried beneath the present.
Yeah.
You have it in, of course, Tolkien. You have it in Malazan. There's these layers of the past that have accumulated, and that somehow inform. They whisper to the present. It's just all over the place. You see it in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. They're older. There was this older, more sophisticated civilization that's gone now, but it has these little echoes that affect the present still. So there's a lot of that in fantasy. There's this fascination with the past and its relationship to the present, and how there are ghosts that haunt us from older eras. So that's something that fascinated me, always has fascinated me. And I feel like that is a big part of what I'm doing as a writer, is engaging with that theme of life's fleetingness and how we wrestle with death, essentially. Not just the death of a culture or civilization, but the death of the individual. And so that's something that fascinates me too. I think most people who read stories, they engage with this theme all the time of mortality, right?
Absolutely.
It's a big deal. I mean, you think about it for just a few seconds, and basically most stories are about death or love or both, right? Then you got vampires, like who combine the two things really well, death and love, right? But yeah, so I mean, that's a big part of what I'm doing, I guess. What I wanted to do as a writer is to write something affirmative too, though. So it's not just melancholy. Oh, we're all going to die. Everything's going to.
You're not diving into grimdark?
No, I mean, I don't think my stuff is grimdark. No, I like grimdark, but I don't think my stuff is grimdark ultimately, because I'm also interested in, okay, so while we're here, what do we do to make this meaningful? What do we do to make this beautiful? And a lot of it has to do with how we relate to one another. So that's a big part of it too, I guess, is how do we make life meaningful? How do we live life with courage and beauty and meaning? And especially in relation to other people, maybe even people that we think are very different from us, very other. And that's what we talked about before, traveling and living in other cultures and getting to know other people and understanding yourself through their eyes. That's a big part of what I'm doing in my writing too. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And that's, in my writing, I mean, you've got to read some of it. It's like, I like to pull out, not just well-known mythology, but little-known mythology.
Yeah.
And hopefully if people are like me and they read or they watch a movie and they see something, they're like, oh, is that real? And then they go and research it. And then, and then maybe a very small percentage, but some of them will fall in love with learning about different cultures and different mythologies. And we can continue this whole, thing of, passing history around to people and the love of it. So in your book, are you giving us the Malazan treatment with a bunch of characters, or are you paring it down? Or
no, I can't do what Steven Erikson has done in Malazan.
Very few people, I think, can.
I wouldn't even try. Yeah, I know my limits. So, or at least I hope I do. But no, he's got tools in his toolbox that I don't have. And he, I think, and his friend Ian Esselmont created something very special through all their gaming, which they spent years and years doing together. And that was a big part of, I think, what grounded that world was these characters they created together, this world that they had which of course they had to write the books too. You know, they didn't just game everything. So, but yeah, no, it's a trilogy. It's not a grand 10 book thing.
Yeah.
So it's a trilogy, and it really is more on the scale of, you know, what you'd expect from a trilogy. But you can do a lot. I mean, look what Tolkien did in his Lord of the Rings. I mean, there's a lot there. In terms of word count, I'm pretty sure I have more words than Lord of the Rings does.
Okay.
Yeah. In terms of word count, I mean, they're not huge books by fantasy standards, but and I don't know what they'll be in terms of. Let's see. The third one is the longest. I think it has. I should know this off the top of my head, but it definitely has well over 200,000 words. Maybe 240,000 words or something like that.
So you're like Last Book of the Dark Tower.
Something about that. Yeah. My third book particularly. They each get longer. So the first book is the shortest, and the second is in the middle, and the third is the longest. So I got longer as I kept going. So yeah, just in terms of like in word, the first book is around, I should know this. It's close to 600 pages, I think.
Wow.
And the second is 700 something, and the third book is 800 something pages. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am so excited to read your books. I like just knowing like you from what you like to read and what you're trained in and everything. I feel like it's going to be amazing.
Well, I hope it's something beautiful. I've had the privilege of having a few authors read the books, and I was delighted with what they said. And the couple of them said it reminded them a lot of Tolkien, but also of John Gwynn's writing.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah, so I'm like, all right, yeah.
It's like, all
John
right.
Gwynn, can't get better than that. So, because I think one thing that all three of us have in common, John Gwynn also is somebody who's very interested in Old English and Old Norse and Welsh and all that stuff. So he, like me and like J.R.R. Tolkien, and he was a Tolkien reader too. Like Tolkien was his, I think, first real fantasy inspiration, along with, I think, Lloyd Alexander as well. So, yeah, similar influences, inspirations for sure in the Old Norse stuff. I'm really loving John Gwynn's current series a lot. As much as I do love The Faithful and the Fallen and the other trilogy set in the Banished Lands, my favorite stuff of his is the current trilogy that he's writing. The 2 books out, The Shadow of the Gods and The Hunger of the Gods, the Bloodsworn trilogy. I'm loving it because of that vibe that he's really got that Icelandic saga vibe in there.
Yeah. It's just like, I am so jealous of you and so many people who, like, I feel like because I just came back to reading a few years ago, and I'm so far behind, and I'm just like, I want to read all the, I guess we're all like that, it's like, I want to read all the books, and like,
there are so many. I feel sometimes embarrassed to admit, I haven't read that author. No, haven't read that author. So I don't think I'll ever get them all. And that's not the point, really, is it, Joseph? Really, the point is that we're enjoying what we're doing here now, right?
Yeah,
we're enjoying
it. As long as you're, enjoying. And this is a thing I've, watched some, booktubers and kind of their confessional videos where sometimes they are like, I'm burnt out, or I wasn't enjoying reading some of the books. And stuff. And some of my favorite booktubers have taken like hiatuses, because they're just like, I can't, of course, we have real life to deal with and jobs and careers and everything. And you just, sometimes, especially if you're, you know, and I mean, I felt this way a little bit. You know, you feel pressure to read certain books because everybody's reading certain books, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, I want to be in. I want to be one of the cool kids, you know.
Yeah. Which is
And
the
then,
wrong reason to read the book. Yeah.
yeah, and then
But
you're,
it's there. You're right. It's there, that pressure.
you know, and you're in there, and you're like, I mean, yeah, like even some books like I'll enjoy them. I'm like, yeah, but this is, you know, I could be, you know, reading something else, and stuff. And like the last 2 months, for me, I think I've read 8 books last month, and that's a lot of
That's a
books
lot. Yeah.
for, you know, for me. That's, you know, I know some people like Jimmy, he'll read like 30 books a month or something.
Yeah.
I'm just like, Jimmy, how are you reading everything? Like someone just throws something out. Oh yeah, I read that 2 weeks ago. How did you do that? You know.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, we got a few comments there from Isaiah. And I am definitely seeing that, Isaiah. And you mentioned Second Apocalypse. I'm reading. I'm actually going to finish pretty soon The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker.
That's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one that's been making like the rounds here.
Yeah,
You know.
Jimmy and also Steve from Steve Talks Books has been reading it. And
I know he had a discussion about The Darkness That Comes Before.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I guess we could talk a little bit about Dresden and the Dark Tower.
Sure.
You've been kind of going through.
Yeah, well, I have been. I chose to prioritize. I say prioritize. I mean, it's been 2 years since I started Dark Tower, and now I'm on the last book. So, and I'm really happy. I mean, it's been a series that's been a lot of fun for me, and what I revel in is how much King does something different with each book, and every single one is just full of surprises to me, even though he spoils his own books all the time.
Does he ever?
Yeah.
Not Stephen King. Oh man. But
I mean, that's a bit of a bragging rights thing, I think, right? Like I'm such a good writer that I can spoil my own books and they're still good. You know?
Yeah, that's what I in one of our lives we were talking about it, and that's like, Stephen King, like, you know what? I'm gonna tell you how it ends, and you're still gonna love it. You know, it's like, but I think me and you may be one of the few people on Booktube who loved the Song of Susanna.
Yeah, weird, right? Yeah. It's good stuff. I really enjoyed it. That book flew by.
Yes.
In a way that, so I have to be honest. The one book in the Dark Tower series that dragged for me a bit, not terribly, was Wolves of the Kala. And I think it was because there was just a lot of lead up. And he was definitely doing the Seven Samurai thing, or the what's the Western that's based on it?
Oh my goodness. I know what you're talking about. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't.
Yeah. I can't believe I forgot. I mean, I even watched it recently. It's the Western, which is basically the remake of. I don't know if anyone there in the chat can call it up, but anyway, that's what he was doing. It was these, you know. Well, I don't want to do any spoilers here, but it's a story that has built into it a kind of a slow lead up that until it gets to this big encounter at the end. So that's the nature of the beast. But I felt like it was a little bit too slow, honestly, in the lead up. But I still liked it a lot. But after that, reading Song of Susanna, it was like the pages flew by for me.
Well, and this is like, I know King's most popular books are like The Stand.
Oh, the Magnificent Seven. It's called
Magnificent Seven. Yes. And then they did a parody of it called The Hateful Eight that was really good. That came out a few years ago. But
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's a darker version of it. But they've remade the Magnificent Seven a couple times. Yeah. But yeah, I love Westerns. And that's why
more than a gunslinger.
More than a gunslinger. Gunslinger is still my favorite of the Dark Tower. I mean, and I think it's because it's shorter. I think King does really great. I mean, he does all his books. Most of his books are amazing, but I really like his shorter books. and his style when he ramps it up, like I think that's why I like Song of Susanna so much, because you go
It is
from
shorter. Yeah.
big, to half the size almost. And I like when he's punchy with his
Yeah.
books. But I think you're gonna like the way it all works out. Have you started the Dark Tower yet?
No, I have to finish The Darkness That Comes Before,
Okay.
and then Dark Tower is after that.
Yeah, I think you're gonna, because I had it semi spoiled for me years ago.
Oh no! That's terrible.
Like, but because I was watching a lot of Daniel Green's stuff when I first got on to watching Booktube, and
Sure.
I think at the time he was going through it, and he was doing a kind of a rant thing. He liked it, but he was doing a rant, and I kind of heard a little bit of it,
Oh,
and I was like, oh, but then so it was like 2 years later before I went into it, and so I didn't remember exactly what was going on. I knew that it got weird in a certain way.
right. It's very meta. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm anticipating that as much as he hinted at the meta stuff in Wolves of the Kala, and he got really meta in Song of Susanna, I'm assuming that Dark Tower, the seventh book, is going to be even more so. So I'm ready for it. I'm definitely ready for it.
Yeah, but I actually really liked the way he kind of, like, a lot of people. There's certain things that I don't, of course, nothing perfect, right? So there's a couple things that I wish he would have done different. But as far as how the book ends, I think you're gonna like it.
Isaiah has read The Stand, it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to read The Stand myself, actually, at some point.
Yeah,
Probably after Dark Tower. That'll be the first King book I'll pick up after Dark Tower.
Yeah, because I went through, actually, the Dark Tower series was the first of the King books I read, and then this year I'm kind of made it a thing to start reading more of King. I've read Carrie, Cujo, his werewolf, book, and then one of his newer ones, Elevation. So, and of course, are you going to read Fairy Tale?
I have not read it. I considered reading it, but I've been hearing people talking about it, and it sounds like a book I will read eventually, but I'm not making it a priority. I have too many other things that I'm committed to already.
Yeah.
So it's not something I'm going to read anytime soon.
Yeah, I had to bump a couple books out of my TBR when I seen that it was up, because I was like, him coming back to fantasy, I was really interested to see how he writes it now.
Yeah.
And, and it gave me a lot of vibes of like The Wasteland, and and those type of things. So I really, I really liked it. I know a lot of people said that the second half kind of drug for him, but
yeah,
I think you'll like it, since you're liking the Dark Tower. It's not as dark as the Dark Tower, obviously, but it's and actually, I did want to ask you. I remember you saying at some point that did you not have cable, or do you not have TV in your house at one point?
Yeah, we still don't. I mean, we don't have a cable subscription or anything like that. I am watching Rings of Power because I have Amazon. So that's through the computer. But yeah, we don't have any cable. We have not had for many, many, many years. Any kind.
But do you have like streaming services though, right? Like Netflix and stuff?
I don't. Yeah, it's really Amazon. I can watch easily because it's
Prime.
And what I'll do is for like I will watch House of the Dragon, but I'll have to subscribe to HBO for a month and
for the time to
So I'm kind of waiting for Rings of Power to end, and then I will subscribe for a month to HBO and binge the House of the Dragon. So yeah, that's how I do it. Exactly. Who has time? Who has time for TV? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I've kind of started to kind of go into that too. It's like there's certain, I mean, we have subscriptions and all that, but there's like, you have these certain shows. It's like, okay, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't had cable or anything like that in a long time, because it's like,
Yeah, a lot of people don't have it anymore.
yeah, because it's really just a waste of extra money,
Yeah.
and like I could never see myself going back to like flipping through the channels anymore. It's
No. Yeah. That's like, of course, I grew up when there were 3 channels on television, right? There was
yeah,
NBC, ABC, and CBS.
yeah.
And
I
then later came this weird thing called Fox. But yeah, it was just, that's it. There were 3 channels when I was growing
yeah,
up. And later, this whole cable television thing came about. And by then, I had been just basically not interested in television so much. So I just did never really, I think we did for a while have some cable TV, but it's been many years since I signed up for that. So, and just there's so many stories I want to read.
yeah,
So who has time? Yeah.
yeah. I can still remember, and maybe this is because I lived with, like, my dad was a lot older when he had us, and then so we lived with my grandpa, and he had one of the old TVs that only had 12 channels, and it was like,
Yeah. We had those. Yeah. Yeah.
and so I tell people that, and it's like, even people my age are like, what is like, I was like,
Yeah.
this thing didn't
Dial
even,
that you change the channel for.
it,
Yeah.
it didn't even have a remote, and if you missed it, you couldn't turn back,
Yeah.
and you better not let him hear the thing going.
Yeah.
Go through them very slowly, but
When I was a kid, we even had a black and white TV. So yeah, with the dial, to change.
yeah,
Yeah.
but a simpler time, perhaps,
Well, I mean, yeah, times change, that's for sure. But nowadays it really is. I think people just sort of, it's more people are catering it to themselves, where you just, if you want, like me, I want to watch House of Dragon, so I'm going to have to get HBO for a month, right?
yeah.
Or I could wait until the library gets the DVDs.
Well, and I think now it's a lot like, if it's a good show, you're gonna hear about it, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna hear about it, and then you can kind of choose, choose to watch it, or or not pay for it, and you're just like, no. I mean, I hear what people are saying, but one thing I did want to ask you is about your nemesis.
Oh, the nemesis. Okay. Yeah.
Couldn't go through a whole discussion without talking about your arch nemesis there.
Yes.
So how did this this awesome rivalry and friendship, maybe undercover friendship with you and AP, where did this come from?
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, I've actually told this origin story like twice in the last couple of days, but I don't mind telling it again. So it was it was a product of Booktube in a way, because I had a couple of videos. One was my video about the origins of fantasy and the development of the genre, and AP left a comment. I didn't know who he was. It was some AP Canavan, right? So, but I could tell from the comment he was very well informed and possibly an academic.
So he left you an essay?
He left me eventually he did leave me an essay length comment, but that was later. That was on a Dresden Files video, actually. I think it was Full Moon that I did a review of Full Moon, and he left a very interesting analysis, which was better than my video, if I'm going to be honest with you. So yeah, I mean, he left a couple comments, and I realized, okay, this guy's, he's an academic, I think. And then in one of our exchanges, we went back and forth, and ultimately I asked him, I asked him if he was an academic, or asked him what his dissertation was about, or something like that. And then he didn't reply. And I thought, oh, maybe I was being too personal there, and maybe he just didn't want to talk about that or whatever. And so nothing happened for a while. And then I was in the process of reading preparing for my Malazan reread by reading all the other Malazan, the prequels and stuff. So I was actually reading Ian Esselmont's the second book in the Path to Ascendancy series. It's called Dead House Landing.
Okay.
So I was reading that book probably a week or whatever after AP and I had that last exchange, and I never heard back from him. So I was reading Dead House Landing, and I opened it up, and for what I don't usually read the acknowledgments, but I thought, okay, let's read the acknowledgments, and I saw the name AP Canavan in the acknowledgments as an advanced reader. I was like, what? It has to be the same guy, right? And the weirdest thing, like a minute maybe later, I got a DM on Twitter. I got a direct message on Twitter from AP Canavan saying, well, oops, sorry, I didn't reply to your last comment or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it was just so weird to see his name there and then have him message me right then. And then I wrote to him, well, as it happens, I'm reading Dead House Landing. And this time I read the acknowledgments. And he's like, yep, that's me. So that's how we met. And as I said, I was in the process of preparing for a reread of Malazan Book of the Fallen and a read of Ian Esselmont's novels of the Malazan Empire. I was going to do them together. And so I asked him, do you want to be in these discussions with me? Do you want to read this along with me and be in discussions? And so initially it was just going to be him coming on my channel to talk Malazan about each of the books. But at the same time, Steven Erikson was encouraging him to start his own channel. And so A Critical Dragon came to be as a channel. It's actually, he has a blog of a sort where he was under the title of Critical Dragon. So he's been doing stuff for a long time, fantasy analysis. And of course, his PhD is in, fantasy narratology and stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's how we met, and he agreed to do this read along with me, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, have you had? Because I know he's a developmental editor, right?
He is. Yes. Yeah.
So had you had like editors look at your stuff before, look at your books?
Yeah, well, the short answer is yes. I had an agent already who was one of the good kind of agents that actually give you feedback and say, I want you to do this, to make not very specific, but usually more general type feedback, which is similar to what a developmental editor does. So I had my agent, who was a very, very smart guy, give me feedback and help me to improve the books already. So on a professional level, I can say that I had some editorial help there. Yes. And he did all that for nothing, because real agents don't make money until you actually get published. So he read my books and gave me great feedback. So, and I had friends and students and family members read the books over the years, but none of them really were professional editors. So it was really just my agent. And then once AP and I got to know each other, I decided, I think it'd be worth hiring AP as a developmental editor, because at that point, I really didn't know how else to make my books better. And having his professional eyes on my books has actually made them, I think, a lot better. So I'm really excited about the feedback he's given me. And I think that the series, the trilogy is in excellent shape at this point. And a lot of that is thanks to his suggestions. So, yeah.
So were you nervous to have him look at it?
I wasn't that nervous. We'd already become friends, for one thing. But I want to make the best story I can. And I know that means getting feedback from somebody who's trained to do it, who's good at it, who's really good at it, can make a big difference. So that's something I wanted. So I'm not being a writer. You probably know this very well since you write yourself. Being a writer requires a strange combination of pride and humility. You have to be proud enough to be willing to put your story out there, to say, yeah, I believe in this. I believe in this story. But you also have to be humble enough to listen to criticism and to try to get better from that feedback. And so I wanted that. I wanted somebody to be tough and give me good critical feedback. Because my whole motive is to write the best story I can. So
Yeah, it's so funny. Like when I was gonna have AP on our first Dresden discussion and everything, and it's just like he's just a really smart guy when it comes to breaking stuff down and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, and I've had editors and beta readers and sent my stuff out for people to read before, and you're just like you said, you're like I think it's a good story. I think people will enjoy it, but I know that people are going to find things and and have to work things out. And, I know AP is so good. He would be able to find every nook and cranny and, just listening to him break stuff down. It's he's next level.
He is next level. He really is. And that's, as you know, he's the advanced reader for some very excellent fantasy writers like Steven Erikson and Ian Esselmont. So that's not an accident. To have your feedback valued by writers of that caliber is a huge statement, I think. So yeah, his kind of feedback, he has a very incredible ability to sense narrative integrity and to understand in ways that you won't even yourself necessarily, because you don't see things. As writers, we have blind spots. We don't see stuff that someone outside of our story can see, things where we have gaps or where something actually contradicts. We contradict ourselves or plot holes or whatever. Yeah. So he's just got an incredible eye for that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. He has his name on the Malzahn, and now he's going to have his on yours probably, right? So,
well, definitely. I intend to acknowledge the nemesis when however I end up publishing these books. His name will feature in there. I'm not sure which version of his name, though. Professor Fireballs, maybe, or perhaps the name that he of the character that is very closely based on him from Malazan, called Apto Cannavalian. Practically a biography of AP that Steven Erikson has written.
That is awesome.
In Crackpot Trail. Yeah. It's like a biography. It's just AP right there on the page. So yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love being in discussions with AP, and even like when we turn it off, he is such a funny person in real life.
Oh yeah. He is. Yeah. Yeah, he definitely is. And that's the great thing about this place. We meet all kinds of great personalities here, I think. So
yeah, that's why, I started my channel, is, I was inspired by, people like you. And, when you started your Dear Dr. Fantasy, I was like, I know there had been a couple other people who were doing stuff pretty similar, but I'm like, that's just a great idea to get to pick the brains of, and chit chat about books that we love more. It's great to do book reviews, and you sit here, you sit here in the room by yourself, and and tell people what you think. But it's a next level type thing when you get to actually speak with with people.
For sure. Yeah, for me, my favorite thing on this platform is the discussions and the collaborations, for sure. But these chats also, where we just talk about whatever, they're fun. And as you said, like Jimmy has been doing these forever, chatting with nuts, and Mike has his talk about nothing. And they're both two excellent conversationalists, both of them. So they were kind of, I think, more or less my model for what I was trying to do with Dear Dr. Fantasy. But it's great to chat with people. For sure.
So what do you got going on? What do you got coming up for everybody?
On the channel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got, I'm going to review The Darkness That Comes Before, and I'm going to start The Dark Tower. And I'm hoping to get the quartet back together for that. I had a group of people earlier that discussed the first 3 books with me. So I want to get them together again for that. We'd have planned to get together again this way. So that's going to happen. And I have a very exciting collaboration going on with Jimmy and Joanna and AP on the Wars of Light and Shadow. And we had a discussion all lined up, but Jenny Wirtz, the author, lives in Florida, and so they were hit by a hurricane down there, and her area particularly was badly affected. So that got delayed, but we've got a new date for that, so I'll be announcing that soon. We're gonna have a sort of initial setup for that. So that's my next big thing, really, after Malazan. The next big series that I'm going to be reading. So I'm excited for that. And I'm doing an ongoing collaboration with Murphy Napier now on Vinland Saga, which is my first ever manga. So that's been really enlightening and fun. And I've learned a lot already. And it's just great to be able to chat with Murphy. So that's going on.
Yeah, she's one of the old old booktubers. She's been around for a long time, and
she's a lot younger than I am, of course. But yeah, she's been on this platform a lot longer. Yeah.
When I seen that you were doing that, I was like, that's excellent, because you're like, bridging the gap from kind of, you have these 3 or 4 people that, like, when you first enter Booktube was like, that's who you see. And then once you start paring down your taste, you kind of get into our corner of of Booktube. But that's, I mean, and I know everyone was telling you Vinland Saga would be your thing. So how far into it are you?
I've read the first 4, and Murphy and I have recorded chats about books 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the next one that'll be out. So 1 and 2 came out. And the next one will be on book 3 on her channel, on her second channel, actually, the Murphy Napier vlogs channel. And then the 4th will be out on mine. They're all recorded, ready to go. So yeah, they'll be coming out this week, actually, I believe. Yeah, Tuesday and Thursday.
That is awesome. I love to see you branching out.
And, that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
I've never got into manga myself, but I definitely, want to give it a shot. There's a lot of things. I'm trying to get through a couple series here, and then I think my big thing for next year is going to be Lord of the Rings. I think I'm gonna.
Cool. Yeah.
So I'm gonna start The Hobbit probably January, and then try to run through that. Maybe we'll do some. Maybe I'll try to get some discussions going. Maybe get you to jump in if you're not too busy.
I love talking about anything Tolkien. Yeah. So yeah.
I'm trying to check off these big series that I haven't had a chance to get into. So
yeah. Cool. Oh, and there's Ben there in the chat too. Hello, Ben. He's been wandering around in Arthurian Britain.
Oh, that's excellent. But I appreciate you jumping on here and hanging out with me. And I couldn't have had a better person to start off with than the person who gave me my first real shot.
Yeah, we had a great time chatting about More Than a Vampire, and of course, with your next book already out, More Than a Gunslinger, this is exciting. And what are you working on now before we leave, if you don't mind me asking you?
Well,
if you can say, yeah.
So I've, like I said, I've finished the sequel to More Than a Vampire. Right. So it is with the editor and the artist right now.
Nice.
And
same artist, because I love your covers, by the way. I think they're just very very iconic. Very like you see those covers, oh, that's a more than a
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that was my whole goal with it. I wanted something original. I'm nothing against people who, because I mean, it's expensive. Even like I feel like I'm getting a great deal, even though it's still expensive to me.
Yeah.
But so nothing against people who just do the clip. Go out and spend $10 on it. But I wanted something completely custom, original, and something that was going to stand out. To when you're scrolling through or scrolling up and down and you see that, you stop for a second and you're like, well, that's not like all the rest. And that's
right.
And but Matthew Allen Bond is an amazing artist, and he actually just did his first traditionally published book. So now he's starting to get recognized by traditional companies as well.
Cool. Good for him. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm super excited for him, and I'll continue to work with him through all these. But yeah, so the third book is out there, and actually really exciting is that More Than a Gunslinger is being made into an audiobook. So
wow, congratulations.
So that will be coming out towards the end of the month, maybe the beginning of November. So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome.
The lady who's...
Oh, it's a woman who's reading it?
Yeah. Well, because More Than a Gunslinger is a female protagonist.
Cool.
So in the Wild West fantasy Western.
Nice.
So...
Nice.
And I've been looking for the right person to do Simon, but it's kind of we'll find it eventually.
Tough shoes to fill
for the audiobook there. And then next month I'm gonna kind of lighten my reading load and start writing the fourth book.
Nice.
But it's going to be
what can you say about the fourth book?
It is going to be a kind of a short story anthology.
Oh, nice.
Of characters that have been in the books.
Oh.
And maybe maybe one or two that are to come. So I feel like, as everything starts to pick up steam, around, the universe, people who don't want to invest in it, or they're on the fence, maybe they can come in and read a little bit here and there and be like, okay, this is the style of story. These are the type of characters that you're going to run into throughout the universe. So, and if they really like that, then they'll like all the books. So,
cool.
So I just kind of, because I had planned for the first 7 books, but I was like, well, I'm not gonna. I had a certain character that I was gonna do on this book, but then I decided, well, I'll do him a short story here and give people, time to run through some of the other characters that are in the book and see,
awesome.
And also people who have read the first 2 will appreciate it because they'll get to see some of their. Because I've asked all my beta readers and people who are your favorite characters? Who would you like to see more of?
That's smart.
And so that's kind of how I did that. But
cool.
So that's what's going on in my neck of the woods.
Nice. Sounds like great plans, and I wish you the very best. Much fulfillment with all of that. Hello.
My son's sneaking in here.
All right. Good to see him, and bringing the kitty cat too. So.
Yeah, we have too many animals in the house. But like I said, I appreciate you stopping by, and I am super excited to see the future of your books, and I'll always be watching the channel there. So
yeah, well, likewise, Joseph. Right back at you. So best wishes with the writing and everything else, and I guess I want to thank you and your viewers for indulging me and letting me be here for this wonderful Sunday chat.
All right, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everyone.
Meow.
Hi, kitty.